Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
This is Wayne Callan for Attitude Magazine. Today's topic, Raise Your Child's Social IQ, strikes a chord in many parents. Most of us would love for our child to have friends, or one friend, to be invited to extracurricular activities and events by classmates, to even just have fun with his or her peers. ADHD medication may give a child the focus to participate in conversations or to be less impulsive, but it won't supply the give and take skills needed for friendships. We have with us today Dr. Christine Lang, who is an expert on developing social skills in kids with special needs. She is nationally certified in behavior analysis and the chairperson of the special education department at Mercy College. She will share strategies and tools to help us sharpen and improve our kids' ability to make and keep friends. So now, without further ado, Christine Lang. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm really excited to be participating today. And as we begin, we're going to start off by taking a look at these two videos and comparing some early emerging social behaviors. Both of the children in the video are engaging in the same task, and I just want you to note any differences that you might see. So I'll start the first one. Okay, so we see this little guy is stacking the blocks. I'm going to turn to the next video now, and we'll watch this child. Okay, so again, as we see, both of the children are around the same age, and they're both engaging in the same task, stacking blocks. But as you look at them and you compare, you can definitely see a major difference in some early emerging social behaviors. So the child on the left is stacking the blocks in a more perseverative way, not making eye contact with the videoer, who I believe to be the parent. And then in the video on the right, we see the child making active eye contact. There's definitely some joint attention there, where it seems like the child and the parent are kind of both sharing in the same interest and in the excitement of the moment. So the child on the left was labeled as a child with an autism spectrum disorder, and the child on the right, a neurotypically developing child. So as we take a look at these videos, we're going to go into next some basic characteristics that we may see that can impact social skill development for children with autism spectrum disorder. And we're also going to talk about how ADHD can impact social skills development. So one of the most famous quotes that I have heard often is, if you met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. And I find that to be really true. As far as coming across lots of different children, they all display different kinds of characteristics, preferences, likes and dislikes, just like a neurotypically developing child. A lot of times, though, children with ASD tend towards social isolation. But then on the other hand, you might hear parents say that, their child loves to be around other kids or plays a lot with their siblings or cousins or neighbors. Sometimes, though, you will see kids with autism spectrum disorder may engage in a lot of perseverative behaviors and really lacking the skill set to engage independently in some social skills. There's a lack of eye contact. Other children may try to initiate with the child, but they don't really have the ability to respond in return. And there's also a lack of community of reinforcers, meaning there aren't many things in their environment that may be reinforcing to the individual, aside from some specific activities that they may tend to hyper-focus on. And just to take a look at the specific diagnostic criteria, we can see that when a child has an autism spectrum diagnosis, there are severe deficits in social communication and social interactions, difficulty developing and maintaining relationships, difficulties with adjusting behaviors to different situations, also very poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communications. Again, we mentioned in the two videos, the eye contact, body language, really difficulty understanding use of gestures, and a lot of the unwritten rules of language. And now just transitioning a little bit to talk about ADHD and social development. Sometimes kids with ADHD may not pick up social skills, just like anyone else might learn their please and thank yous from an older sibling or classmate. They may not pick up on these daily occurrences. A lot of times due to inattention, they miss social cues. And sometimes what I see in classrooms a lot is that children with ADHD want to interact with other kids, but they go about it in the wrong way. So they're recruiting interactions from others in an inappropriate way. And then sometimes those behaviors get inadvertently reinforced. So when other kids respond or parents respond to some of these inappropriate ways to gain attention, those behaviors become part of their repertoire. Other times, some kids with ADHD may avoid social situations because of a perceived lack of success. Just like we took a look at the specific diagnostic criteria for ADHD, for autism, we'll take a look for ADHD. And I really just highlighted the symptoms that are associated with social interaction. So we see talking excessively, blurting out answers, difficulty waiting turn, interrupting others, difficulty sustaining attention to tasks or play activities. So for an adult or a caregiver, we can be patient in those situations and understand what the child is experiencing. But when other kids are in the situation, they may not be so patient, and they may not understand why a particular child is continuing to cut them off, or not letting them have a turn, or having difficulty sharing and waiting or calling out in the classroom. So there's some other research that shows there's a difference between a lack of know-how versus a lack of social interest. So we can look at social skill deficits as a function of an inherent neurological impairment, such as with the case of autism spectrum disorder, or the lack of social interest. So a child may have prerequisite skills in their repertoire, but they're not demonstrating them. Again, maybe due to lack of motivation, some anxiety issues in social situations, or some sensory sensitivities. And I have the links below for any research that I've included, so you can definitely take a look at that afterwards. So we talked a little bit about the specific characteristics of autism spectrum disorder and ADHD and how that may impact social development. But I also now want to get into a little bit of strategy discussion. So as Wayne mentioned, my background is in behavior therapy. So I'd like to talk today about facilitating social skills through a behavioral approach. And when we look at social skills as a collection of behaviors that we can teach and shape, then we're able to really address them versus just saying, oh, my child has autism, and the characteristic of that is to have no interest in social exchanges. When we look at things from this diagnostic model, then it kind of shuts us off from being able to teach. So we want to look at social behaviors as learned behaviors, and they're observable and measurable, and it's really any skill that facilitates interaction and communication with others. It can be non-vocal or non-vocal. Vocal or non-vocal. So a lot of times I get the question asked, what does behavior analysis have to do with social skills? And I think there's often a misconception about ABA and what it actually is. And I think a lot of times people think ABA is just discrete trial teaching, where a teacher is sitting across from a student and holding up flashcards or delivering M&Ms. And I mean, that's just one methodology within the practice or the science of applied behavior analysis. And there are lots of other different methodologies. And in fact, behavior analysis is one of the most widely researched methodologies for working with kids with autism. Additionally, there are hundreds of evidence-based tactics in the behavior analytic research that talk about teaching and expanding social skills. So a lot of the strategies that we'll be talking about moving forward have a little bit of a behavioral lens to it. So what types of social skills can be taught? Basically, any skill can be targeted within the natural environment, ranging from basic prerequisite social skills to more advanced repertoires and pragmatics. So some early social repertoires involve eye contact, responding to name, attending when someone is speaking to you, being able to greet others when someone enters the room, initiating an interaction, as well as responding to initiations, pretend and imaginative play, sharing and turn taking. Some more advanced social repertoires involve engaging in conversation. So not just saying, hello, how are you, but going beyond the basic conversational introductions, engaging in the choices of others. A lot of times it's hard for kids to go beyond what their preference is and engage in some low preference activities just because it's what a friend may choose. Asking questions of others, following social rules, tolerating situations when things don't go your way, which can be really challenging, regulating emotions, so kind of not having that overly emotional reactivity to certain situations, making and keeping friends, responding appropriately to change in routine, and also really responding to those non-vocal social cues and being able to read social situations, which segues us into pragmatics. And those are the social practical aspects of language. So unwritten rules, non-vocal cues, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. This is just a little diagram that kind of shows us all the different ways that our body language and eye contact can give us an indication of certain situations. And so for all of us, we can look, let's say, at someone's posture and see if they're slouching. Maybe they're disappointed about something that they just heard, or they're sluggish or tired, whereas a child with ADHD or ASD might not pick up on these social cues and not really notice what's happening in the environment around them. And that can really impact how they're interacting forward with others. So children may also say inappropriate or unrelated things, calling out and interrupting, tell things in a disorganized way. Again, difficulty with interpreting social situations, and really just not learn by observing others, which is typically how we learn the world around us, by observing what happens in certain situations when someone engages in a certain way. So we're going to take a quick look at this video, which was from the show Parenthood, and I want us to see the pragmatics in action. So as you can see in the video, Max did not really understand that the other kids were annoyed or bothered by his blurting out. And the teacher obviously didn't really handle it in the best way, but he was also a bit frustrated with Max's behaviors. And now I want to follow up with this next video so we can see Max's perspective on what happened. So as you can see there, Max didn't even understand why he was sent out of the classroom. So that, again, goes back to the pragmatics about really not getting the social cues in a situation, those unwritten rules of language. And this is just another example of how sometimes children may say things that are inappropriate in certain situations. It says your child sees your friend reach for some cookies and says, better not take those or you'll get even bigger. You're embarrassed that your child could speak so rudely, but you should consider that they may not know how to use language appropriately. And so a lot of times kids with autism and ADHD take things very literally. They're not quite sure of sarcasm or other kinds of figurative speech when you're engaging in conversation, which can really lead to difficulties with social media. Now, I know even for adults who might be technologically savvy, reading into text messages and understanding what someone's intent was behind that can always be very tricky. So imagine how it can be even more difficult for a child with ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. So this is a little blurb that kind of talks about a way to speak to a child with how social media can be the same as vocal communication and how we want to maybe approach it in a different way. And again, we're going to be moving on to strategies, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And below are the links and references to kind of look more about social media and ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. So again, just to recap, we talked about ASD and ADHD, how social skills can be impacted. And we talked about how a behavioral approach is related to social skills. And now we're really going to get into the specific strategies and how we can implement strategies through everyday interactions with our child or in the classroom. And the most important piece for that is natural environment teaching. It involves creating the need to know and the need to learn, and it really addresses pragmatics and leads to better maintenance and application. And so I'm sure a lot of us have taken driver's ed, and there's the written part, but there's also the part where you have to get in the car and actually practice. So it's really important to practice the skills and the context within which the child needs to use them for it to be functional and applicable. So functional communication training is a important strategy. A lot of times kids with ADHD and ASD, they have great vocabulary and lots of of vocal behavior, but they don't use their words in the right way, in the right situation. And so in those situations, sometimes challenging behaviors can result in getting wants and needs met or getting social attention. And so when that happens, those inappropriate behaviors will continue when the same circumstances arise. So what we really want to do is teach appropriate replacement behaviors that lead to positive outcomes for your child in those social situations. One basic strategy is modeling, where you're providing a model of vocal phrases for kids to use. So if they're pulling a piece for a turn or they're cutting someone in line, just simply giving a vocal model of what they should say instead. A lot of times we say to our kids, that's not how we speak, or that's not how to say things, but we're not giving them the right expected way that we do want to say it. Sometimes kids with autism may emit some echolalic behavior where they repeat vocal models. And in those situations, we can use textual prompts. So write the phrases that you want the child to say on a dry erase board. You can keep them handy in the kitchen, on iPad, on index cards, to help them with what they can say in a social situation. Another really important strategy that involves being prepared in advance. And so if your child has a birthday party or they're going on a class trip, it's really important to help them see what's happening in advance. So go online, visit the website for Bounce Town, wherever the birthday party is going to be. Let them see a visual of what to expect. Share videos about the event with your child if you're going on a trip. One family, the little guy was worried about going to camp, and we made it a photo book of his family members, the friends that he's going to see at camp, pictures of the camp, pictures of his bunk, to really help prepare him ahead of time. And it's also important in situations that are typically problematic, that your child has difficulties with, you want to provide alternative responses beforehand. For younger kids, sometimes edibles are helpful, like a treat or a lollipop. So when you have to leave that play date, instead of saying, hey, it's time to leave, you're providing a reinforcer in advance to get them to transition more readily. Or right before your child might be about to lose in a game, you prepare them. Hey, look, if dad gets one more, he's going to win. What are some things that we can say? Good game, dad. Maybe I'll win next time. Things like that. So they have alternative responses rather than getting really upset and flipping the game before, it's over. Same thing at that birthday party when someone sits next to the birthday boy before your child gets to go there. So it's really important to prep in advance for scenarios that can happen and what appropriate responses might be. One of the most effective strategies is positive reinforcement. And I know a lot of teachers and parents say, oh, I've tried that, or it doesn't work with my child. But it's really important that you have the right reinforcer and the right motivator. But basically, positive reinforcement involves delivering a specific reinforcer, and it could even be vocal praise when you see a behavior that you want to have increased. So a lot of times I might do an observation in a classroom, and I see a student call out with the correct answer, and the teacher will say, that's right, good job. So it's kind of sending a mixed message to the student, because they just engaged in a problem behavior that we want to decrease, but the teacher said, you're right. So it's really important to differentially reinforce the behaviors that you want to see an increase in, and not respond to the behaviors that you want to see a decrease in. Another strategy is direct instruction. So really directly and explicitly teaching the skill in a very concrete way. And there are a lot of evidence-based social skills curricula out there. Jed Baker is a really big name in social skills training. Second Step is a really good evidence-based curriculum. And it really outlines, what to say, how to teach it, and it goes across various social situations. So sometimes those curricula might be used in social skills groups, which are really helpful. They facilitate pragmatic language in a really functional way with peers, and they model real world situations. So when I'm teaching a social skills group and I know a child has trouble with losing in a game, I'm definitely going to organize the situation so he's probably going to lose. So then I have a teachable moment to work on those alternate appropriate responses. Or sometimes we may take a walk downstairs to the store and practice ordering from the counter, making eye contact with the sales clerk, getting their money, things like that, where it's the actual situation. It goes back to that driver's ed example, where if you only practice the skills in the context of four walls in an office, we might not see the generalization into the real world that we're looking to see. Social stories are another really good example to help kids navigate different kinds of social situations. And basically, they just give a detailed description about the event, the activities, and what is expected. And they can include text or pictures depending on the verbal repertoires of the learner. And this is just an example. It was for a student who used to have really major meltdowns on the school bus because he would want to sit with someone who just would say no. And so this was a social story that I had developed so he can really learn to navigate the situation. So I like to sit with other kids. When I want to sit next to my friend, I may say, may I sit next to you? Sometimes they may say no. And a lot of times kids have difficulty understanding that. Like, I used my words, I said it nicely, so it's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to get the thing that I want. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So teaching kids to tolerate when things don't always go the way they want, even though they're engaging in the expected behavior, is also really important. And then the rest of the social story just outlines, how it might make the child feel and what some appropriate alternate responses might be. And, it says, I can walk to my seat and relax. It's okay to sit quietly by myself. And that's just kind of what might happen if he engages in a behavior that's less than expected on the bus. This is another example. There are a lot of different kinds of published material that have little cards of different kinds of social stories, and it can explain how you can go about initiating an interaction with others. Social scripts are another really good strategy that you can use. Again, you can individualize this for your child, or there are a lot of already published materials out there, but it gives opportunity for practice. This shows what I can say when I lose in a game, or things I can say when I'm frustrated or angry. And peer-mediated strategies are really helpful. Sometimes this can go either way, but a lot of times in homes or classrooms, if you're delivering reinforcement to a sibling or another child who's engaging in the desired behavior, a lot of times you might see the child quickly pick up on that and say, oh, if you can see those creatures over there, he says, oh, he has that. I'm going to go in and do that same behavior so I could get that fish. Sometimes, though, this isn't an effective strategy if the child doesn't have observational learning in his repertoire. So we might put kids in mainstream situations to have more exposure. But if they're not learning, if they're not observing peers and looking at the consequences, they might not pick up as we would like them to those social skills. Video modeling is another really great strategy. You can find videos online, or you can even have fun creating them with your child or siblings or friends. And role playing is another really great example. You can take different roles with your child or the learner and the instructor on different roles in a situation. So during my social skills group, we might have a situation where a friend decides that they don't want to play with a particular friend. And so we act out what could happen, what an appropriate response could be. And we also may want to act out what not to do. So when a friend says, no, I don't want to play with you, what would be a not good way to respond, and what would be an appropriate way to respond? Another research strategy is playing with different kinds of dolls and stuffed animals. This research was conducted with children with autism spectrum disorder, but it showed that when they engaged with toy figures, they took on the role of both the listener and the speaker by making the toys pretend to talk to each other, and then it functioned to increase conversational exchanges. You can also use the toys for role-playing activities to act out experiences, just like I had described with role-playing. Facilitating conversational exchanges is also really important to continue, as I mentioned earlier, those reciprocal exchanges. So not just saying hello and how are you, but moving on beyond that. So one good strategy that you can do as a family, you could do it after dinner or during the social skills group. I like to do it during snack time, or you could do it on a car ride, or if it's in the classroom, you can do it during snack. But sometimes you can put little questions on an index card. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite iPad game? What's your favorite color? What do you have planned for the summer? And then kids take turns selecting the card and asking someone a question, but then also asking them a follow-up question or providing a comment from their own experience from that situation. And it really helps to increase peer initiation as well as peer responses just beyond that one reciprocal exchange. Peer conditioning procedures is another really good strategy. As we learned earlier with the diagnostic criteria for ASD, there may be a lack of interest in peer interaction. And a lot of times children with autism are always looking towards caregivers because that's who is primarily meeting their wants and needs. So sometimes having a peer or sibling deliver preferred items instead of an adult can increase a child's motivation to engage with another child. So examples include peers passing out snack during snack time instead of the teacher, or if you're using a token system, a peer delivering the token, or a sibling giving the child an ice pop for a treat at home. And also having peer models engage. If your child likes playing with blocks or puzzles, having a peer do that with them instead of an adult. And that can really function to condition other children as motivating for the learner. Group contingencies is another really great strategy. So examples include board games that require participation as a team to win. So you're trying to play against the board instead of each other. Group scavenger hunt, group activities, class-wide token systems where when the class or the family engages in a target behavior, social behavior, when the goal is reached, everyone reaches that together and they choose what to do together. So a class ice cream party, a family trip to the movies. And again, that really enhances kids' desire to interact with others because they're on the same team to reach a common goal. Facilitated play dates is also something I suggest to parents. A lot of times they say, oh, I can't have a play date because they turn into a disaster. My child cries. They don't want friends over. So sometimes it's important to provide support. One way to do that is to even just get a dry erase board and write down everyone's choice. Sometimes I like to do a lottery where I let everyone choose what they want to do. I put it on an index card, I put it in a bowl, and then I select what we're going to do first based on the lottery. It helps with kids learning to take turns, tolerating things not always going their way, because it's hard for kids to have someone come into their house and utilize their materials or engage with other kids in their choice. It's also really important to keep playdates short initially because you want them to remain positive and be a successful experience. This establishing operations and setting events kind of goes back to what I had said earlier when we first started strategies about natural environment teaching. And it really involves creating the need to engage. So in the area of language development, let's say for kids with autism, we might give them a bowl of ice cream, but not give them a spoon. And that really increases the motivation to have to ask for a spoon. So take that same strategy into a social situation. So for early childhood, you might give one car with a car ramp for multiple kids, and it makes them have to interact. If they want to play with that car ramp, they have to be able to talk to another child to ask for a turn. Another really good setting event is just putting away tablets and other electronic devices, and you'll see how much it sparks kids' interest in actually interacting with each other. I know I had just mentioned facilitating play dates by adult support can be a good strategy, but then on the opposite end, research has also shown that when you remove the constant adult interaction, peers become more reinforcing to each other and conversational exchanges will increase when they don't have that adult. So sometimes when kids are telling me, oh, look at this, look what I made, look at this, I always say, tell him, tell your friend, or ask so-and-so to play with you instead of asking an adult to play. Another really important opportunity for social skills development happens in school. A lot of times schools may have social skills groups which are led by school psychologists and other peers. Sometimes this is done during a lunch bunch group or during recess. Some schools have peer mediation programs where peers function as models for social skills out on the playground. Joint class activities or a circle of friends. When I was a teacher in a special class in a public school, I had started this activity where I would have some of the general ed classes sign up to do activities with my class. So for these joint activities, we would, go for Earth Day, we all went out and cleaned up the playground. Or during different times of the year, we would do different activities, and it would have the kids in my special class engage with some of the kids within the classroom. And one of the most important outcomes from that came from a student that his dad told me, "You're never going to believe what happened. This weekend, we were out on the main street, and a little kid was walking by, and he said, 'Hi, Johnny,' to his son. And he said that the fact that there was another student in the school that knew who his son was, and he had autism, the dad said it meant more to him than anything. And it really was from that activity building where I had the students really engaging together throughout the school day. Other school-based opportunities, which kind of goes along with the group contingencies, or class token economy systems where kids are working together towards a common goal. It's really important when we're talking about social skill development to be proactive. And some ways that we can tell that your child may need some additional support are looking at some of these items below. So your child, you're noticing, has difficulty sustaining interpersonal relationships. Play dates, birthday parties, other social events always seem to wind up in a disaster, and you dread having to go to them. Your child has expressed sadness or disappointment in a lack of friendship. And also your child may have explosive outbursts daily in response to various social situations. And so when a lot of these things happen and you're finding it hard to manage by yourself, you don't have to. You can seek the support of outside help through social skills development groups, which you could probably Google in your area, or also check in your insurance plan for psychologists, either in school or private, that may provide some social skill group opportunities. Behavior therapists, as well as speech and language pathologists, have social skill groups and social skill therapy, as well as social workers. So there are a lot of different opportunities to get additional support. And it's important to know that you're not, dealing with this alone. And the last thing that I really want to talk about, which is important, is to provide many opportunities to engage. And that age-old saying, practice makes perfect, is so true. The more opportunity the learner has to engage in a particular behavior, the more opportunity for reinforcement, and the more likelihood the behavior will become part of your child's repertoire. So I would have parents that would, avoid going to the movies because it was so problematic, or just say no to every birthday party. But what happens is your child then doesn't become part of the classroom community or the culture. And so it becomes more and more challenging. So I always tell parents, try not to avoid situations that are typically problematic. And as skills are mastered, begin to increase the variety of activities, phrases, peers, situations that the child must encounter. And the more frequently you target a particular skill, the greater the chances that generalization will occur. And it's just like anything. The more you practice something, the better you will become at it. So even if you do have your child enrolled in some kind of therapeutic situation where it's a social skills group or weekly therapy, you really need to practice that skill every day. And it's very easy to turn everyday experiences into opportunities for social skills instruction. And I hope that with a lot of the strategies we talked about today, you learned how to maybe turn different kinds of situations in your home or in the classroom into social opportunities. I also have just a couple of links for different kinds of resources for social skills. There are lots of apps on Apple to find lots of different social skill development opportunities. Even on Pinterest, you can see a lot of different social skill examples. There are some book links and some website links that you may find really helpful. And I think that it now gives us the opportunity to ask any questions that I can respond to following the presentation that you may be thinking about.
Well, that was a terrific presentation. And yes, we have a lot of questions. One is from Arlene. My son and I practice social skills interactions at home all the time, but when he gets to the actual situation at school or at an event, he forgets what we practice. Any suggestions?
Sure. So as we talked about throughout the presentation, we mentioned how it's really important to practice in the actual situation. So you may practice at home through the strategies we mentioned, like role playing and things like that, but it would be really helpful to practice the skill in the actual situation with maybe neighbors, or if you have siblings, or if you can be a part of the situation initially and then fade yourself out. So even though your child may have mastered the skill in the home environment with you during practice, it might not carry over, which you're mentioning. So initially, it may be important to still provide the support in the actual situation and then fade it out if possible. Or also give your child some of those social skill cards to practice on their own, because again, as we just mentioned, additional practice will make perfect. So even if they had a little cheat sheet of some ways to initiate interactions, but the more the child gets to practice in the actual situation, the more likely we'll have some generalization into the real context.
Mm-hmm. Another parent asked, my child has ADHD and has just entered middle school. A lot of the kids know each other pretty well, so how can she ease her way into one of these groups? It's tough enough for kids with pretty good social skills, but hers are less than optimal.
Right. So transitioning into a new school, especially at the middle school age, is difficult for any child. And it can be even more challenging for a child with ADHD. So I would also suggest that you check with the school psychologist to see if they have any kinds of social skill groups or systems that are already in place with the school regarding some school mediation, peer mediation opportunities. But I think also it's important for your child to identify some things that are some activities that are preferable to her, and getting into groups like that where other kids share her same interests will be really helpful. So if there are any after school activities, sports activities, after school enrichment, I find that a lot of kids make really good friendships when they get together with kids that share common interests. And that may be a good way for kids to meet other friends, and then that can carry over during the school day. They may see that peer during recess or in a special class, and that would really help facilitate the interpersonal relationships there.
Mm-hmm. Another parent asks about what she should be looking for in a social skills group. Her 10-year-old son is so shy, so she doesn't think he would do well in one of these groups. He might need one-on-one help. Does that ever happen? Is it with a counselor, or wouldn't respond well in groups, I guess is the question.
Okay, absolutely. I mean, we want to go back to what we're talking about, though, as far as practicing the skill in the context. So at some point, we would want the student or the child to be in a social group situation with more than one child. But that's an excellent suggestion to begin first. So there are occasions where I might first work with a child individually to really see what the specific behaviors are and really learn what strategies work best for that child in a one-on-one setting. And then when I can see what's most effective and how they respond to different triggers, and I can help the parents understand those variables, then I can fade the child into maybe a group with just one peer, and maybe a peer model that doesn't have special needs, because sometimes it may be difficult when we have kids together that have various common learning issues. It's harder to teach the skill. So fading in additional peers that may have skills that your child can model would be very helpful. But then again, gradually fading in more and more peers and more examples of various social situations. But it's definitely possible to start one-on-one and then fade in the additional peers.
Mm-hmm. A dad asks, he has an 8-year-old son who has ADHD and dyspraxia, and the son gets too close to classmates when he's speaking. They seem really put off, so he can't even practice the conversation skills that I've rehearsed with him. How do I keep him from breaking this social rule of keeping a personal distance from the other person?
So that's a really good question, and I think it's important to carry this over to the classroom. It's really important to get teacher support as well as other professionals in the building to help carry out what you're practicing at home. Because again, you can practice it at home and your child might demonstrate the skill great, but when you're in the actual situation, they might not fall back on what you had learned. But there are lots of different kinds of ways to remember, like extending your arm out is how far you should be to appear. And maybe you can help your child develop this little sometimes I have parents and kids develop their own little codes secret codes on how to remember certain things. And maybe they pretend that they're stretching and extend their arms out and make sure that they're not touching anyone. And that's how far they should be. Mm-hmm. But again, if you have the opportunity to practice the skill with some peers that your child is comfortable with, whether it's siblings or neighbors or cousins or friends that you're really close to, it's important to do it in the situation as well as practicing it a lot at home.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting situation. Barbara says, my child is confident in engaging with adults and at home, but really struggles with peers and also class participation in activities at school. How can we as parents facilitate better engagement for her at school?
Okay, so as we discussed today, it's really important for kids to gain reinforcement from peers. So when adults are always the ones that are delivering the reinforcement or answering peer questions or having their wants and needs met, they're always going to stick with the adults because it's safe and they know that that's how things happen. And so it's really important to branch out for other kids to learn that engagement in other situations can be reinforcing as well. And another way to do that, again, kind of goes back to collaborating well with the teacher. And sometimes, again, the teacher may develop a system with the child where it can be a safe opportunity to participate in the classroom by calling on the child first. So the answer that they may the answer that they wanted to provide isn't already taken by someone else. Or the teacher might say, hey, if I'm going to call on you, I walk past your desk first so you can be prepared in advance. So giving the student some preparation ahead of time to know that they might be called upon to engage. Then also really positively reinforcing engagement. So when the student does participate, give them reinforcement, whether publicly or after class, like, I'm so proud of you, you raised your hand today and you did such a great job, or writing a little note and handing it to the student, delivering positive reinforcement with a smiley face. Hey, you did a really great job participating in the class today. Everyone thought your responses were really great. So the more success and reinforcement the child has with a particular behavior, the more comfortable he or she might feel with increasing their engagement in social situations.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice. A couple of parents have asked about behavior analysis. They thought it was just restricted to children with ASD. And is that used also with kids with ADHD?
Yes. And so I'm glad that I included that slide about ABA, because as I said, 9 times out of 10, anyone that I speak to thinks ABA is just discrete trial teaching, where you're teaching these very concrete skills in a very repetitive way. But again, just to reiterate, discrete trial teaching is just one methodology within the science of behaviorism. And so typically, discrete trial teaching is used for children with ASD because it has been found to produce great results. However, besides the wide range of research, speaking from personal experience, I work with many, many children with and without disabilities and specific diagnoses using principles of behavior. And so I know a lot of the strategies that I talked about today, someone might not see that that's a behavior analytic strategy. But a lot of those components are related to reinforcing appropriate behaviors, breaking skills down into smaller components towards long-term goals, providing lots of opportunity. Those are all basic principles of behavior. So I hope that if we did learn something about behaviorism today, that it's not just focused on discrete trial teaching. There are lots of really effective strategies that are used for any learner. And again, if you look at the behavior analytic research base, you can see that behavioral strategies can be used to teach a really, really wide range of skills. It can be used in sports. It's used in organizational development. So behaviorism has a really wide range of implementation.
Are there any apps or games that you really recommend? This one parent is trying to teach his 13-year-old social skills. Are there any that sort of stand out in your mind?
Well, I do really like, there's a link that I provided on this slide here. And if you click on these apps for facilitating social skills, there's not one in particular that I like more than the other, but in that there are really great examples. And a lot of them include the opportunity to look at I know we couldn't see some of the videos today, but the video modeling is a really great strategy for preteens and teens, where they see how their behavior impacts other people's responses and feelings. So you can see firsthand, oh, when I continue to interrupt someone and cut them off, this is how they feel. And then it helps you to be able to correct your behavior in the situations to really foster better interpersonal social skills. Also, the website below, understood.org, they provide a lot of practical examples for different kinds of social skills. And as I mentioned earlier, Jed Baker, there's a lot of specific curricular opportunities in there to look at that are really scripted, that help in different kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm. This is a tough situation. Classmates have made fun of my 12-year-old daughter's quirky personality. So she doesn't really have an incentive to make friends or socialize with them. What should I do now?
That is really tough. And I do see in classrooms sometimes the child that has a specific disability gets pegged for a lot of things happening. And I see sometimes they get blamed for things that might not have happened because they might get called on a lot by the teacher for stopping a specific behavior. And it really starts in the classroom with the person in charge. And I mentioned before about modeling. And it really goes a long way. So in the classroom, I know a lot happens outside the classroom, but when the teacher is in the classroom modeling appropriate behaviors and praising your daughter's behaviors, I really love how you participated. And that was a really great answer. I'm so proud of you. Or pairing, the child up with another peer who might be a little more friendly and forgiving in certain situations to reinforce these social opportunities. Because it's just like trying a new food. When you finally get the nerve to taste it and you like it, you're more apt to try new foods. And it's the same with behaviors. When you have a positive experience with trying a new behavior, you're more apt to do it again. So what we want to happen is that your child does have even if it's very little, some positive experiences with other kids. And it's also important to praise the behaviors of the other kids who are being friendly and patient and thoughtful, and reinforce their behavior publicly. So, so-and-so, I really like how you're being so helpful while you're in the group with this person and that person. You guys are working really well together. And so showing the other children that it's important to work together and be positive. And it also helps to work as a class to learn about diversity and different kids' needs. And that really stems from, I think that's a larger issue. And I don't want to go too long, but a lot of times when I was teaching, I used to teach special classes within a public school. And sometimes kids in the general ed classes didn't understand what the kids in my class were doing as far as some challenging behaviors or stereotypic behaviors. So sometimes I would go into all the classes by myself with a book about diversity or accepting others, and we would do a little activity about how everyone is different, but we're all the same, and really teaching other kids to be more accepting and understanding. And I think that that's important for an entire school culture to embrace.
I agree. Robin is asking about her son. When practicing social skills, our son's response to any question is, "I'm not sure." It seems he can't formulate his own answers or opinions. How can we help him with that? I guess that would sort of be key to keeping a conversation going. And I don't know if you have.
Sure. I mean, I think that goes back to some of the strategies we mentioned today about the social scripts and the social stories, and also the differential reinforcement. It's important that we don't inadvertently reinforce behavior. So sometimes kids might say, "I'm not sure," and then we might say, "What do you mean you're not sure?" Or "I think you are sure." Instead of saying all that other language, let's just give them a response instead to model. So let's say the question was, what's your favorite thing to do over the summer? Instead of accepting "I'm not sure," we can model, or we can write down on an index card 3 different options, and we can put them out in front of the child, and he can read them if he's a reader. If he's not a reader, you can put 3 different pictures, and he can say one of those things. And then we can reinforce that. "Oh, wow, I love going swimming too." Or another child during a social skills group might say, "I love swimming. Do you like the pool or the beach?" So giving a model ahead of time before that response of "I'm not sure" comes out can increase the likelihood that the child will start engaging in independent responses and really not accepting the unsure as an answer, but being sure that they have something to say. And then again, fading that support over time once we see the response increasing.
Stacy wants to know, how do you find a good ABA program? She says she has a 13-year-old with ASD and ADHD. He desperately wants friends and tries much too hard, has a hard time navigating social interactions. So I guess Google ABA, or how does that work?
Sure. I mean, you can. And I think that a lot of states have now made moves to create a licensure for ABA providers, because initially sometimes you can just take a weekend training and people say that they're trained in applied behavior analysis. But you can also go on to the Behavior Analyst Certification Board website at bacb.com. And there's a link that says find a certificant or certificate registry. And you can find someone in your area within your zip code who is a board certified behavior analyst or a board certified behavior analyst doctoral, which means that they have their Ph.D. in that area. And you can find providers that are local. And if they can't help you directly, they may be able to give you information regarding some effective behavior analytic programs that are nearby, because most likely if they live in that area, they're familiar with some of the good behavior analytic programs that are nearby.
And one last question here. Sarah is asking, what do you think is a good strategy for dealing with social skills in the midst of the event, like when a child gets too loud during a small party? So I guess she's trying to ask, she doesn't want to embarrass her son or daughter, but what would be a practical strategy to do that?
Sure. So again, if you can't correct the behavior in the moment because it might be embarrassing to go right up to your child and remind them, you can, again, develop at home those little cues that you and your child can work on together. Like if you're scratching your head or if you're doing a certain behavior, it means X, Y, and Z. And so I have a lot of families that we work together to come up with very, very basic, because, it's not like we're the Yankees and we're calling all these pitches and signs with all these different combinations. You want to keep it very simple so your child knows, and really self-monitoring is an important strategy for your child to start learning. And sometimes I have kids at home with a little piece of paper and I have them mark down when they're engaging in the behavior, because self-monitoring leads to better awareness of the behavior as it's happening. And then you're more likely to be able to correct it yourself over time. But maybe developing a little cue system with your child can help when you're in public situations.
Well, I think we're out of time, Christine. You did a wonderful job, really, putting this challenging stuff in perspective, giving us practical strategies. So I know I found it extremely helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for being here. Really appreciate it. And have a good day, everyone.
For more Attitude Podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.